Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're all well. My name is Frank Raimondi. I'll be the host for today. We're going to wait just 30 to 40 seconds and let a few more people log in, and then we'll get started on our building a solution for MSPs to collect their clients' data, part 3. So just hang on one moment. Okay, hopefully everybody's got a. Where are you at today, Frank? And what's the weather? We'll wait. We'll do some banter.
Yeah, I'm in California. It's 80 some degrees right now. I think it's gonna warm up a little more where I'm at, but
Yeah, well, we're
yeah,
supposed to be over 90 here in Portland today, so for the weekend.
yeah, but you get the humidity, right? So we don't
A
get
little
that.
bit, not too bad, not too
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah, you're still on the west, so
Yeah. When I just came from Nashville, and that was not low humidity.
I know that's how it is every time we as we travel, as you and I do, you come off the plane, it's like, oh my goodness, what is going on here?
Yeah, yeah. No, that first shock of that wall of humidity or something is just always nasty. So, well, anyway, hey, well, let's get started. Thanks everybody for joining. Again, my name is Frank Raimondi, and our special guest today is Gurnee from SecurityStudio. We are going to talk about securing data and kind of looking at ways to evaluate your network and your customers' data, or if you're an internal shop, what you need to do internally. So today we're going to make it pretty interactive. Frank and I will be chatting. If we need some content and slides, we'll bring that up, but generally we'll be ready to just discuss, and we'd like to make this interactive. So there's a question field in the box and GoToMeeting. Just please submit your questions along the way, and we'll take plenty of breaks to answer those. We also, look for topics in the future, right? This series is focused on thought leadership, just sort of topics of interest that people need to hear about without being sort of a heavy product pitch or a heavy product focus. So we're going to talk a little bit about products today, just kind of as appropriate, but really this is more about the discussion of protecting and evaluating and assessing what your environment is like, and then ultimately how you're going to improve that and fix those. We do have some other activities coming up, both physical and virtual, at nodeware.com/events, so feel free to take a look through there. And then we'll be, again, recording this event and potentially some snippets. If there's great words of wisdom coming out of our voices, then we'll record different snippets as well. So keep an eye out for that, and we'll send that to you. A couple of specific things coming up. One is in middle of September. Actually, just before that, it's almost the same week, same overlapping days. IGI Cyber Labs Nodeware will be at the Build It Live event in Orlando. We'll also be that same week at the Team Logic event, which is in Tampa. But this Build It IT Live is a big one. We'll be speaking there on a number of different fronts in September. And then SecurityStudio will be at the ASCII Edge events. The next one is in Chicago. Any others after that, Frank, or is that the last one for you guys?
Yeah, I think there's Virginia after that, and so yeah,
the last one, the big ASCII Cup and all that stuff. Yeah, perfect. So Frank will be there. So look for us. Come talk to us. We'd love to do a little bit more deep dive of our products and our thoughts. So again, Frank, you wanted to just introduce yourself, kind of what you do there and where you've been around for a while?
Yeah, absolutely. So good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Frank Gurnee. I am the channel director here at SecurityStudio. Been in the channel a long time, so done a number of fun things over the years that I've been doing this stuff. So kind of started my career in the US military, came out, went to work in Silicon Valley for a startup called Covad Communications, which is really hard to say these days with COVID, right? So the name didn't really hold up too well. So that anyway, so some of you may have remembered they were one of the first DSL companies out there, and so that was a really great learning experience, being a young guy straight out of the military. So did that, went and helped found a company called Chartech, which is a training organization some of you may know about, helps folks do sales training, still around doing great stuff for MSPs these days as well. So was really lucky to be a part of that entire thing. Worked for the last 8 years at Vertical Action. So some of you may know that as a web marketing company. So mostly on the content and business development side of things. And about just over a year ago now, so I just came up on my year with SecurityStudio. I've been at SecurityStudio here to build out an MSP program in all this stuff cyber. So super excited to be talking about cybersecurity, data protection, all of this fun stuff with Frank. And if you have questions for us, you might want to call out the Frank, because if you say I got a question for Frank, it's Frank. Right? So
it's Frank squared here today, so we're good.
Exactly.
So happy to hear it. And thanks for joining today, Frank. We've enjoyed a really strong partnership with SecurityStudio, kind of a supplier slash partner slash user. Help really focus both of us on helping an MSP and their customers deliver safety, right? Be more risk averse, know what's there, know what the assessments is and risks are in their environment, how to fix them, right? Collectively, we do that. So why don't we start, Frank, just kind of defining what risk assessment is, right? I think, people see a vulnerability assessment, some people hear risk assessment, some people hear, all the kind of various terms around the category, but how do how does SecurityStudio kind of look at risk assessments?
Yeah, it's a great question, Frank. And there is a lot of confusion in the industry, and we're seeing that. I mean, people are calling things risk assessments, which are, essentially the vuln scan piece, which you guys kind of handle. There's no easy button. There's not something you're going to throw on the network and it's going to give you a full risk assessment. There are pieces of that, right? So when we talk about a risk assessment, really what we're talking about is looking at an organization from a holistic security approach, right? So understanding the entire organization's risk posture and where they stand today and where we can take them. The thing with a risk assessment really is there's 4 controls. So in a true risk assessment, you're going to have administrative as your first control, and administrative is going to cover things like your security policies, procedures, things that you do within the organization. The second would be physical. So physical is going to be your camera systems, your door locks, your key systems, all of those types of things. Anything that is a physical security threat or risk is going to be in that control. The third control really is internal technical. So this is where Nodeware sits and some of the other tools out there that run on as a scan. That's where your internal technical, as well as the fourth is external technical controls. So really those 2 are where those automated scans, but even within those, as it can identify things, it can identify risks, but it's not necessarily going to give you information around how often things are done, or how things are done within that. So it might identify it and tell you that that's there. There's a piece of hardware here, but it's not going to tell you how often is that maintained, how often is it managed, what is done with it. So a risk assessment really is a set of questions or statements that are asked in order to evaluate and identify different risks within an organization.
Okay. So maybe explain sort of how typically risk assessment is used once you've done it, and you can, is that both internally and externally? Where does, you get some document, if you will, what does somebody do with it?
Yeah, so a risk assessment really is what I think is the first step in any cyber engagement. And the reality, or the reason why, is because if you don't do a risk assessment, how do you know what's needed in that environment? We could build the most amazing stack that we want, but every piece in that stack is not necessary for every customer, right? So the idea is that you do a risk assessment, you get an understanding, you then get a number of reports. So you can have an executive summary report, a full report, administrative report, that sort of thing. But a nice executive summary report is going to give you everything that you need to present to a customer, what their current risk is, where they stand, and then from there, you really want to understand those pieces that need to be put in place over time to get them in the best position possible. So we call that a roadmap, right? So we have a roadmap that essentially tells you, here's all the things to do over time to get yourself in a better position. And the neat thing about the way we kind of do risk assessment is we score it very much like you see lots of scores out there, A, B, C, D, you see, the green light, red light, yellow light. The interesting thing there is that in scoring risk, a C is still a passing grade. And so a client may say, well, I have a C, I'm okay, a red light, green light, yellow light. Well, yellow, I'm still going through the light, right? So it's not very quantitative in the ability to give someone a real understanding of where they sit. So we score it very much like a credit score. And so with that, a credit score is 300 to 850. So we score in the same manner. And what's great about that is the conversation that you can have with a customer around that becomes much easier. It's really hard to have a conversation around cyber. Why do you need it? Where do you stand? What are all those things, right? But
you're already doing all that stuff for me.
Yeah, most people understand credit, right? I mean, we all understand that we're always working on our credit. I understand that. I mean, I just bought a house, and as soon as I went to get, apply for some loans, my credit dropped in points, right? Even though I'm doing great and doing all the right stuff, because I just applied, my credit score dropped, and that means I have to work on it to get it back to the place that it was before. And that's no different than security, because we're always working on security, right? And a new vulnerability comes out, and you understand this very well, Frank, in the Nodeware side, and your score is going to drop some. How do I get it back? Well, you need to remediate and take care of those vulnerability issues, and your score is going to climb again. So you're always working on something within the organization, and that's kind of how you use a risk assessment to continuously manage an environment.
Yeah. So if in that scenario, so another kind of overused term and somewhat over promised, I guess maybe is the right way to say it, right? The title of a CISO, right? The Chief Information Security Officer, or even a CIO to some extent, but really more on the CISO side. So if an MSP is using SecurityStudio and the S2 and doing a full risk assessment, they're really kind of go back to strategy, right? They're strategizing on what needs to be done. What is that roadmap? Is that sort of servicing as a CISO within that company, within that partner?
Yeah, so that's one of the pieces, right, that a CISO has fall on their shoulders, is managing risk within an organization. And so, our tool, our environment allows somebody to continuously manage that over time, to show progression, to show themselves getting into a better position over time. And so from a CISO or vCISO standpoint, it really gives the MSP the ability to have a managed service like everybody's used to, in that they're always working on that security, and they're able to show and prove the things that they're able to do to show, exactly what they're doing from that perspective.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. So I think kind of along those lines, right? One of the pieces that I think is really relevant for that where we play in as a product, and I think just is kind of the basics that I often talk a lot about cyber hygiene, right? And there's basic hygiene that, I think of personal habits, right? You shower, you shave, well, maybe not you, but you don't shave.
Both of us, right?
Trim. But there's some basic elements there, and then you go more, you expand from that. And I think one of the pieces that, again, which is really a nice combination of what S2 does and what Nodeware does, is building up a cyber hygiene profile or improving your hygiene. And a couple of the pieces that, and this comes into some of the practical applications of this data around compliance and insurance and renewals and applications and all. But we kind of looked at the basic cyber hygiene that's been kind of ongoing. Maybe it's a firewall, but it's increasingly kind of basics are MFA or multi-factor authorization. is required, right? Security awareness training is becoming a big piece. You know, an MSP or an account has to be somewhat managed for detection and response kind of programs that, you know, put a small XDR for all the different types of that. But the fourth leg that we talk about a lot is the vulnerability management, right? And proactively looking at your vulnerabilities, because, right, we all know these vulnerabilities, known glitches in software and hardware, you know, Microsoft to Cisco to Adobe to everybody publishes these vulnerabilities. And if you're not really proactively looking at these on an ongoing basis, and, you know, helping and have a plan for the remediation of the ones that you find, then you're just really setting yourself up for problems down the line. And so, you know, again, kind of the nice, you know, 1-2 punch here of doing a risk assessment. It's, you know, you're kind of getting that good snapshot. You're able to put it into context and sort of build the plan. But in the meantime, the day-to-day process is to look for new things that might have come up, right, beyond what was identified in the risk assessment. So I like kind of clarifying that cyber hygiene is that, you know, it's a four-legged stool, right? You got the 4 key pieces of what is in the security stack that an MSP might deliver, or that an end user has to deploy. So
yeah, and I think you know, the providing those best practices, and as I said, kind of a risk assessment is the start of the entire engagement, right? And Nodeware is included in that. A vulnerability scan is a necessary piece in that risk assessment, because you want to understand what's one, out there on the network, two, what vulnerabilities exist, right? So, and how that affects your risk or your customer's risk in their environment. But you know, the interesting thing is, you know, what you hit upon, and that's, you know, where when you talk about hygiene and, you know, all of these things that can be done, you can have this, you know, amazing cyber stack, right? But one, the interesting thing is that the customer themselves, as MSPs, we as an MSP have done an amazing job of selling ourselves and our services as being, we handle all your technology for you. You know, we are your technology consultants. We're your outsourced IT company, right? All of these things. And so all of this cyber stuff is fairly new. And that hygiene hasn't been there, right? From the MSP perspective.
Point product. I need this, I need that today, right?
We've been remotely monitoring and managing. We've been taking care of, you know, the network. We've been, you know, handling antivirus and that sort of thing. But all this cybersecurity stuff is new. But the interesting thing is that the customer kind of thinks that they're covered, right? They think this piece is handled. They think all these hygiene things that we're talking about are things that are being done today. And it's really hard for an MSP to go back to their customer and say, hey, well, these aren't things we're taking care of today, and we need to charge you more for it, right? That's probably one of the hardest things, and you hear it, I'm sure, all the time, Frank, how to go out there and sell that to the customer. So, you know, with all that, and why, you know, I go back to a risk assessment as the start of any cyber engagement, is because it is something that you can go back out to your customer and do a risk assessment and start that conversation down cyber. Hey, this isn't something that we've covered in the past. It's absolutely something that exists today and you need to be worried about. Here's where you are today. So provide a risk assessment summary to them. And then, so in a QBR, for instance, they can go do that, right? And then say, you know, what's great is, as we always have taken care of you, just like we have, if you move up to this next level of our service, we'll cover all the cyber stuff as well. And so what it gives the MSP the ability to do is go out, do a risk assessment, provide that information to their customer. And you know what? If their customer says, no, I don't want to move to that, say that's okay. I just need you to sign this to understand that I'm not responsible for that piece, right? So in the hygiene conversation, I think it really fits well to say that, because most customers think you're already providing those services for them. So you really need to get out there, do a risk assessment for them, provide that information. You know, what's great about Nodeware and SecurityStudio, we have our unlimited S2 Go lightweight risk assessment that any MSP can do as many of those as they want. So go out and do it on a QBR existing customer. You guys have the 7-day trial, so they can run a vuln scan right on the network at the same time and really get a great picture of what's happening in that network and that environment, and provide that next level of revenue for them as well as protection for their customer.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, we see, when somebody first run their first vulnerability scan, and they always think, oh, we've got 50 devices, but when you really add up the things that they're not thinking about, right? The other IP addresses that are on that network that are very susceptible as well, right? I mean, they're probably more susceptible than a typical server because you've got focus and things going on that server that you've taken care of, but you forget about the printer that the lawyer brought in to, because he wants to keep confidential documents handy and didn't tell anybody, right? And so you've got IP cameras and VoIP phones are a little less risky, but you still got to make sure you know what's there and count them. And you can't protect what you don't know and don't see. So this combination of identifying, putting them into the risk profile, getting the roadmap to do this is yeah, absolutely critical, really critical. And I think that, again, this identifying and knowing that environment. So maybe talk a little bit about what else is kind of typical, maybe just detail a little bit more about what's in an assessment.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, you have the 4 controls, and really within that, there's many different aspects. So lots of things, but you're going to go through a set of questions that really, and here's another confusion point. So I'll kind of go this direction. A lot of people believe that there's a compliance need for everyone, right? And so compliance doesn't necessarily hit every single organization, although it's starting to. And we hear about things like the FTC safeguard rule, which is coming down, which today hits automotive dealerships and accountants, but more and more industries.
Consumer loans, so it's pretty broad, actually.
Yeah. So well, you're right, and it's broad. So I mean, the FTC is going specifically after those guys, but yes, it's much broader than that, right? It hits most industries, and in that FTC safeguard requirement is you need to do a risk assessment for a customer. And of course, the 1-2 punch of SecurityStudio Nodeware, I think, checks almost many of the boxes needed within that FTC safeguard rule. But so within that, those number of questions, as you go through those different statements and questions, you really get a good understanding of the environment that you're working in. But the compliance thing, what I really want to say is SecurityStudio comes from a different mindset. So the mindset really comes from an InfoSec mindset rather than a compliance mindset, because compliance really means I check these boxes and I'm done, right? And with security, as we were talking about earlier, it's not a one and done. It's a continuous managed platform environment. Security is always evolving. You always should be working on security in your environment. So if you're just trying to meet a compliance need, you're not doing enough, right? And it doesn't matter what level of compliance it is, that's really not the best way to, at least from our mindset, to kind of address all of these things. So what we really think is you take someone through a journey of security, and really we do that through a number of levels. So for instance, we have our S2 Go, which is kind of the base, get a start, get a baseline, understand what that environment looks like. And then a level 1, a level 2, and a level 3. And really each one of those brings in new nuances or additional questions or statements to find out about that environment. As you go through those levels, you are meeting the compliance needs. So it's not about checking off these boxes, but for instance, and I'll give you a for instance, one of our level 2 assessments, once you get there, you kind of meet all the needs of the HIPAA requirements and that sort of thing. FTC safeguard is as low as, an S2 Go and that sort of thing. So, but the idea is you take someone on a journey that's not overbearing or overwhelming to that organization,
Mm,
because,
mm.
if
Yeah,
you
yeah.
want to, yeah, because if
It's
you,
easy to stick your head in the sand at that point.
yeah, if you start them at a level 3, right, which has something like 900 questions or something, that's going to be a huge undertaking for anybody. But if you start them at that S2 Go level, move them to a level 1, and so on and so forth, over time,
Yeah.
you're building upon what you've done and you're checking off those boxes while you do it. So,
Yeah. And it's just building awareness and sort of value add to the customer. You're right. You're giving them a roadmap. You're not just plop here. Here's everything at once.
you're also creating project work in the time,
Yeah.
right? Because,
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
that's another revenue stream. So not only are you managing that for them, but you go, okay, here's things we need to take care of over the next year. And you really can plan that out with a customer instead of everything has to be done tomorrow. You can say, look, that's not the way this works with security. And, most cases when there's a breach or something of that nature, everything that's looked at by an auditor is what have they been doing to get themselves in the best position, right? So as long as you can show them that you've been doing your best effort, that sort of thing, you're going to be in a much better position than somebody who's done nothing, right?
Right.
Obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. No, that's really really valuable. So this combination, maybe we, just sort of maybe you've kind of covered it well enough. I'm just wondering, one of the things that we talked about sort of in preparing for this is, what's the value combination, right? I mean, well, I guess maybe there's Nodeware as one contributing factor. What other contributing elements do you have, or if an MSP's already got data on something, what else kind of contributes to the assessment, put it that way?
Yeah, and so, it's like we said, so the 1-2
You
punch,
have
right?
a question that you're answering, which is a big piece of
Yeah,
it.
yeah, I mean, because you get a good understanding of all the things. So as we said, the 1-2 punch, obviously, Nodeware is a fantastic tool that runs on the, you run it on the network. You're going to identify the things that are there. You're going to see the vulnerabilities that exist today, and you can continuously manage that and monitor those vulnerabilities for new ones that come in or anything that may be coming in, to the network. On our side, it's really about, those things that you can't see with that. So the things like, when it does identify a fire, or let's say a backup and disaster recovery box, right? It identifies that, you see if there's vulnerabilities there, but does it tell you how often that backup's being done? Does it tell you, when was the
How is it
last
being
time it was
done?
tested, right? It doesn't go that deep. So the risk assessment really does. So we take all of what you guys are scanning and looking for on the network and all of those things, and we kind of take it to the next level. And that's why the combination works so well, because,
Yeah,
you have those things that you just wouldn't know from a scan. And that's why I say there's no easy button. There's nothing you're going to run on the network that's going to tell you that, right? Those things. And there's many of those things within a network or an environment. So, there are things that you either understand as the IT person or that the administrators know that you're going to have to ask questions to understand as far as policies and things like that.
yeah,
And all of those things combined really give you the best picture of the risk in that environment.
perfect. Okay. Okay, great. I'm just going to send a reminder to the listeners, if you got any questions or thoughts or just comments, please submit them in the question field there. Love to take those on. Maybe what I'll do, just as a shameless plug, let's call it, talk a little bit about Nodeware in terms of what we collect and how we collect it. We have virtual network sensors that capture everything on the network, again, from a remote camera to or remote other IoT devices to servers and kind of everything in between, as well as, somebody brings on a network on, second day they're, using the tool, or 20th day, an alert sent to the MSP to provide information about that new device being found and what you might want to do with it. The other thing that, again, kind of the back and forth between us two and the assessments is that we provide the identification of a vulnerability, where it is, what asset it is, but we also provide the remediation recipe for those vulnerabilities. So you're not even to go research it, but you can actually within the program lead, okay, this is the DLL file that's out of date, or this is the KB file that's missing, or this version of Adobe or Word, it looks at application software as well as the OS and other basic elements of that asset. So lots of different materials there. And again, supporting the S2, and whether it's an insurance application or compliance, as Frank was saying, the other Frank, that there is the data is kind of a king here, right? In terms of what the environment is like and what risks are there. So
yeah, I mean, I think all of those things are really important. And the cool thing about our integration, so we're integrated in the sense that once you deploy that, it's connected to the SecurityStudio risk assessment platform. In that connection, and we were talking about it earlier, how your credit score fluctuates over time, right? Because things happen. It actually in real time daily is pulling in that information. And so if there's a new vulnerability that hits the network, it's actually going to affect the score within SecurityStudio S2, we call it. And so you're always able to see what's happening really in real time, and you can show the things that you're doing for your customer over time. And I think that's really important when we talk about managed things, right? So we've found in managed services, the more we can provide information of what we're doing in the background for a customer to protect them, the better off we are, because we're always doing so much work to keep them up and running and everything great. It's hard sometimes for them to understand why they pay us, right? Because as an MSP, you guys aren't doing anything. No, that's not true. We're doing tons of things on the background to keep your network perfect and safe and all
your value. Yeah, no, you're the fees you're paying it's good value. So just
right. You want to keep paying us because that's why you're doing so well, right? So, but we give you all of that information. Both Nodeware and SecurityStudio are consistently providing information that helps support that justification of what you're doing for your customer. And I think that those reports and things, when you sit down and when I know everybody is supposed to be doing QBRs. Do we do it quarterly? But the more you can do when you go to a customer and provide them real, true information, rather than sitting down and going, "How's everything going?" "It's going great." "Awesome. See you next time." Right? That's how a kind of QBR goes these days.
No, I mean, again, it comes back to where data is king, right? Data is the value add that you're keeping watch, you're fixing things, and you're doing it proactively, right? You're continuously looking for things that, and again, just tying it back to an insurance, right? In cyber insurance, it's the seatbelt analogy from 30 years ago when, it was, kind of nice to have seatbelts in the car, and then it became required, and then it became required to wear them, not just to have them. So, the same thing with vulnerability and assessments is there's a term one of my buddies in the industry has said, continuous insurability, right? Yeah. You can't just check the box once a year and say you're doing these things, because, if you, God forbid you get attacked and you have, you go to file a claim for the work that you did or the data you lost or whatever, and they check, were you doing MFA all the way? Every employee that you said you were? Oh, no, well then, claim denied. Move on.
Right.
So, these are the things that everybody has to think about. And
well, that's one interesting thing. Well, so the FTC safeguard. I mean, most every MSP today has an accountant client or is working with an accountant themselves, right? And every accountant is responsible for checking that box that they are doing these things. And I would say it's just what you said, Frank. Most likely they're checking it, saying, "Yep, we're doing it," but they really aren't, right? And most of these compliance requirements require a risk assessment, and most of them actually have changed their wording now to have the word continuous risk assessment or risk management.
Yep.
Just as continuous vulnerability scanning is so important, this word continuous is exactly what we talk about in the MSP world, right? So we're continuously monitoring and managing your network. We're continuously managing and monitoring your risk. We're continuously managing and monitoring your vulnerabilities. So all of those things kind of go together, which is why, again, I always go back to it. The risk assessment piece is kind of the start of the cybersecurity engagement. It's continuous
Oh, yeah.
through there, but
Yeah.
then everything is added onto that, right? So,
Well, and again, it's sort of, yeah, this whole assessment and then the cyber hygiene, right? Where's your base level that you have to have, right?
yeah.
And what are you going to build on that based on what you find in the assessment issues, based on the workload that you discover that's just junk in there, right? And systems. I mean, we've heard some MSPs clearly say that they've gone to the customer and they either found a lot of issues that said you got to get these fixed before we're even going to start managing it, because we're not going to accept that risk. So it's a big play there. So okay, so I think we're good on pieces here. Why don't we bring up just as a special offer for attendees and partners and interested in coming giving us a shot. So Frank, why don't you describe your summer special?
Yeah, so we'd love to talk more about risk assessments and that unlimited vulnerability or unlimited S2 Go that we talked about, and all of the different things that we provide. We have a partner program that has some amazing things built into that. So one of the things we're really trying to do is help partners understand all of these things, as well as provide them a way to add additional services and solutions to their MSP. So with that, we actually have a vCISO certification program. So we help you become vCISOs, or help your employees become vCISOs, so that you can, I like to say, MSPs have always kind of lived in the S in SMB, the small, right? IT companies that outsource their stuff to them are usually small businesses, but really a vCISO type service opens the M up in SMB for our partners. So medium-sized businesses can now get in, or MSPs can now get into those medium-sized businesses, add additional revenue and sometimes larger revenue streams by being the outsourced CISO for a lot of these medium-sized or larger-sized companies that have CISO requirements, right? So that's part of our partner program, is we do certify you as a vCISO. We give you unlimited access to that S2 Go to go out on your QBRs and do risk assessments. Obviously, that connection with Nodeware, there's no cost for that. So if they're a Nodeware partner, or through our partnership, they actually get some assets, which is kind of cool, and you can talk about that in a sec. But they can do those 7-day trials, for those QBRs to get that information. And really do as many of those as they need to really start that cyber engagement. But our partner program, we have $100 off that this summer. I'd love to talk to everyone on the call about risk assessment, risk management, vCISO, all of these fun things. So if you'd like, come to securitystudio.com/demo. Just sign up for a demo there. We'll talk to you. We're real easy to talk with, and you can do it that way, and we'll go over that entire program. And Frank, you might want to talk about the assets and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So as I say, on the same site, if you're interested, you can you can sign up and create your own Nodeware platform as well. And when you do that, then we load 50 free assets, which is the normal way to buy is in subscription, which is a block of 50 assets. So that free block of 50, $750 retail value or list per value. But those assets are there for you to use for up to 6 months, and again, start your process. And you were talking about the free trial. One of the things I think this combination of data here is that really looking at a prospecting tool, right? Use this where you could run the Nodeware for a week with your end user. You find out exact count of assets, exact vulnerability factor or risk level, and then put the data into your S2 assessment. Be able to present to them, hey, Mr. Customer, here's our risk assessment, and by the way, here's the proposal that we would take and what we would deliver and what it's going to cost. So you can really go in much more knowledgeable to your customers. So really hope you can take advantage of that.
Yeah, man, from the prospecting side, Frank, I mean, I think that's an amazing part of this entire thing, because
Absolutely.
sales can be hard. It's one of those things, and of course, all of us as tech background folks, we want the easy button. We want throw something on the network, and we want to email the customer a quote and be done, right? But the
Yep.
reality is, are we going to win the business that way? And the likelihood is less if we go that route. Now, if I go out and I sit down with the customer and I say, hey, we're gonna run some stuff on your network, but at the same time, I'm gonna ask you a number of questions to really get an understanding of your business, your organization, how things are doing. And you spend an hour of time with that customer, with maybe their HR person. You walk around, the way we used to do a network assessment, right? If you spend that time and you do that, you've built a relationship with that customer, which I think is a lot different than throwing something on the network and emailing a quote, right? You spent that time.
Yeah.
Now asking for a $2,000 a month or $5,000 a month contract is a lot easier than it would be if I just sent that over and it's just a number. I've built a relationship. I've talked about why these cyber things are needed, and we've created, that whole entire kind of way of doing business is the way to win.
Oh, absolutely.
Over the opposite, which is
And
what everyone's looking for. Hey,
and-
we're all, Frank, I don't know about you, but I'm one of those introverted extroverts, they call them, right? So I'd rather not do that, but then when I'm put on the spot, I'm going to do it, right? So
no, absolutely, absolutely. No, I think that's critical in how you're just adding value, right? And ultimately these days, if you're not doing it and being, even with an existing customer, if you're not, sort of starting to, as you said, the S2 Go, give them a free evaluation of where they're at and look at that. But if you're not doing that, then one of your competitors in your local market is going to be doing that. And, if they can show that, I mean, again, this is a little bit basic, but sometimes it's worth the reminder of, both protecting your customers and, learning how to add value to them and, come in and take somebody else's customer and be proactively, building your business. So, well, that's great. I think we're actually finished, but we'll finish up a little bit earlier. So, Nora, if you want to put up just the one slide real quickly on the upcoming events, just so we can call people, remind people what's coming up, but I guess I can do that as well, just speak of it. Build IT, Team Logic, we'll be at DattleCon in October. SecurityStudio is going to be at the ASCII events, and I think some others along the way. So we'd love to have you come and talk with us. Nodeware.com/events if you want to look in the future and just either for the recording of this session, if you want to share it with your colleagues, if you found some value, we hope you did. But from the office of the Franks, or the offices of the Franks, we'll bid you all a fair day, and thanks again for joining, and look forward to talking and seeing you again soon.
thanks so much, guys. Take care.
Bye-bye.